So today I want to talk about innovation, and innovation is a big topic, so we're not going to cover everything in the next half hour, but I do want to give you some really practical things that you can do around innovation in your own business, in your own team, and these principles apply. It doesn't matter whether you're running a single person business, whether you're running a large multinational organization, whether you're a middle manager within an organization, you can use these principles, and I want to make them really practical principles. And the whole thing about innovation is, are you willing to change? So let's start off by looking at change, because the people who are most willing to change are the ones who are best ready to innovate. Doesn't necessarily mean they're the most innovative, but if you're not willing to change, then innovation's not going to succeed for you anyway. So I've got a little bit of an exercise to start with, a bit of self-reflection about something that you did recently, something that happened in your life, and let's make it your professional life, that there was some change, and I wonder how you dealt with the change. Now, don't write it down in the question box, but I'd like to write it down for yourself, what you did. So what you know what the change was, and how did you deal with it? So write down the action that you took. Because I'm going to then, I'm assuming you've done that now, I'm going to tell you that I reckon there are 5 ways that people deal with change. 2 of them are not very good, and 3 of them are much better, and I hope you're in that 3, 4, or 5. So keep a note of what you've done, and we'll come back to that in a couple of minutes. So let me give you an example. One of the changes that's happening in all our lives is that people are more mobile now, and they have smartphones out all the time. And how do you deal with that in your business? Are you taking advantage of that? Are you resisting it? Let me show you how 2 cafes dealt with the circumstances that people were coming into their cafe all the time wanting to order, but they're on their smartphone. So one cafe, which is in Terrigal, just north of Sydney, the manager there got upset by it. So he had this sign that he put on the cash register, 50-cent surcharge for being on the phone at the counter, because he didn't like the fact that he couldn't have his normal morning chat to his customers. Sometimes they were holding up other people in the line, so he decided to penalize them. Okay, so that's definitely one approach. Another approach was taken by my local cafe. This is Nino, who runs a Juggler, my local cafe in Leederville in Perth, and he also has people coming in on their phone all the time, and he runs a tiny little cafe. But instead of being upset by it and penalizing them, what he's done is he's teamed up with the people at Rewardle, and Rewardle's this app that allows you to use your smartphone like a coffee loyalty card, and other restaurants and other shops as well. So I can go in, I can scan my little QR code on this little iPad device here, and then I can earn credits towards future free coffees. I can even load it up with money so that I don't have to carry cash around with me. So these are 2 people who had the exact same situation, people coming in with smartphones, and they had 2 different approaches to them. So I wonder where you are. And as I said, I reckon there are 5 possible categories that you could fit into. So number 1 is, I hope you don't ignore it. And I've given each of these a bit of a rating from -10 to plus. So if you ignore the change, so when a change happens in your professional life, in your business, if you ignore it, then you're not going to last for very long. And I think most of us know that. I hope most of us aren't ignoring the change that's going on around us. I hope you're not resisting it. So a lot of people do resist the change. That's like the cafe owner in Terrigal. He decided that he didn't like the change, so he wanted to restore the status quo. It's not as bad as ignoring it, but it's still not great. The next thing you can do is adapt to it or manage the change. And an example might be that in the cafe example, you might train your staff that if somebody's on the phone, you politely serve the person behind them until they're ready to be served. Okay, so that's a way to adapt to the change. The change is there, it's a bit inconvenient, but you find a workaround to it. The better way, and this is what Nino did, at Juggler, is he found a way to embrace the change. So rather than seeing the change as a problem, he saw it as an opportunity. So look at, people on their smartphones, what can I do with that? And so I've given that a rating of +5. So can you look at change as an opportunity rather than a problem or something to be worked around? And the last one is, if you can, is to lead the change. So this would be people like Apple and Google who create the smartphones, and they're creating the disruption in the world, and other people have to adapt or embrace it. Okay, so that's best. Best of all, if you can create the change and lead it, and then other people have to work around that. Okay, so I'm going to ask you to go back to your that scenario that I asked you to think about. In that particular scenario, and I'm not asking you to talk about how you deal with change in general, because it really helps to actually look at a specific situation. In that specific scenario, how did you deal with the change? And I've got a bit of a poll for you here. So let me launch the poll. Okay, so that should be coming up on your screen. Hold on. Press the launch button. It should be coming up on your screen now. So you've got the chance to, yeah, and again, this is anonymous, so you can be honest here and think about that specific example that you had that I asked you to think about earlier. How do you deal with the change? Did you ignore it, resist it, manage, adapt it, embrace it, or were you the person who, did you actually initiate the change? So you actually led the change. And this really, that the way you answer, not this one instance, but the way you deal with change in general is a strong measure of how well you're fit for the future, because there's a lot of change happening, and you want to innovate, but innovation only happens if you're up in those top 3 quadrants at least. Okay, so most people have voted. Let me show you the results, which is kind of what I expected. So I've run this poll a few times, and I'm pleased to see that nobody ignored or resisted it, and I think that's a little bit self-selecting with this audience. You're here because you're interested in innovation, so you're not the sort of person who wants to resist change. Yeah, okay, so it's pretty much split evenly between the other 3. Yeah, in fact, in this audience, more people are leading the change. So you led it, you initiated it, you created the change. In most other audiences where I've run this poll, most people are in that either manage, adapt, or embrace, which is good, but it's really great to see that there are people here who are leading the change. And I think that's partly because there are a lot of people here who run their own businesses, and therefore you have to lead the change, otherwise you're going to go out of business. Okay, so with that in mind, let's look at innovation. And specifically, as I said, like innovation is a very big topic. So what I want to talk about today is how do you create the space to innovate, space for yourself as well as space for your team members and your organization. And space is not only physical space, but it's actually how do you create an environment for innovation. And the 3 things I want to talk about broadly are how do you give people permission to innovate, how do you set the focus for your innovation so it isn't just random creativity, just hoping that you're going to strike lucky, and then how do you find the time to innovate and how do you create the time in a really busy world. So broadly, they're the 3 things we're going to talk about. Well, we've only got 20 minutes, so we're not going to spend a huge amount of time on them, but I will give you a bit of an overview and some practical tips as well. So let's look at the first one, which is giving yourself permission to innovate. And by yourself, it's not only you, it can be other people in your team as well. So it's your team as well. So where are you getting new ideas? I had an interesting Uber drive recently, an Uber ride to the airport, where my Uber driver was a really interesting guy. Like he asked me what I did, and he said, "Oh, you're a futurist." And I said, "Yeah, I am," because I was a bit surprised, because still most people outside the industry don't know what a futurist is. And then he showed me this book that he's been reading, which is a book all about the future. It's like 150 authors talking about, their little idea about something that we should be thinking about in the future. And it was interesting that he is an Uber driver who's actually a futurist as well, or interested in the future. And I've come across some amazing Uber drivers. So I'm not saying that you shouldn't expect that from Uber drivers, but what I'm saying is that you can get ideas from many, many places. And for me, it happened to be in a ride on the way to the airport. So where are you giving yourself opportunities to get great ideas? So one of them is from people. So the people you hang out with and the people you don't automatically hang out with. So if you try to immerse yourself and engage with new people, you've got more of a chance to get new ideas. And for introverts like me, that's not always easy, but if I want to be innovative and I want to expose myself to new ideas, that's a really great way of doing it. I have to force myself to do it. Travel is another way, and many people get ideas on their holidays or when they're traveling on business. Again, take the opportunity to do different things and experience different things rather than what you're already familiar with. What sort of activities do you engage in? So I've just started doing some personal training. So I had a personal training session this morning, and it's really interesting talking to the personal trainer about motivation and how different people are motivated. And those sort of ideas I can use in my business as well. There are plenty of online resources for innovation, to be innovative. And the secret with online stuff is to get stuff that you don't normally engage with. So if you're always reading the same blogs, subscribing to the same newsletters, watching the same YouTube channels, engaging with the same social media people, then you're likely to be, you're not likely to get as much exposure to some new ideas. So look elsewhere as well. Activities and personal are kind of related, but where can you get ideas in your personal life? And the last one is history, and not your own history, but where can you get ideas from history? Because you can learn a lot about the future by looking at the past. So I've given you just 6 ideas here. They're not the only 6 places that you can get ideas, but if you use them as a starting point, I'd just like to ask you, where do you get new ideas? And this is a chance for this interactive bit, so I'd like you to type in the question box where you get new ideas. And I'll just read out what people are saying. Social media, good. So someone says social media. Oh, I will say who said it. So Jane says social media. Where else do you get ideas? So, my teenagers, Kerry says my teenagers. Paul says online blogs and books. It's interesting, Kerry said teenagers. I've got 4 teenagers in my life. None of them are my own, but 2 of them are my partner's kids, and the other 2 are my niece and nephew. And they're great. They're great for ideas. I engage with them quite a lot, and I'm always amazed by the ideas that they have. Graham says networking groups and events. Jill says medical conferences. Philippe says personal time. Yeah, alone time. Yeah, good. And when we talk about time, Philippe, I think that there'd be some ideas that you're probably already putting into action. Okay, good. Okay, so let's look at the next one. As you can see, we're going to go through these reasonably quickly, but I do want to give you time to have a little bit of reflection as well. This next one, I've got a little bit of an exercise for you. So how do you create a focus for innovation? And what I mean by that is, how do you decide what things you're going to change? Because there's so many things you could change in your business, and it seems like there's always a new bright shiny object that you could use. What are the things that are worth focusing on? And it might seem a bit odd that you think about innovation and creativity but still narrowing it down, but that's exactly the way that it works. So if you think of innovation as applied creativity, then you really do want to have some constraints. You do want to have some focus around it. So I've got a little bit of an interesting exercise for you. I hope you find it interesting. So think about your business, and think about your business or your job or your team, and think about what you've got. And I reckon you can think about this at 2 levels. There's some stuff that you have, and there's some stuff that you want. And there may be an overlap. So that gives us 4 quadrants. So the first one of these is the stuff that you have that you actually want, that you want to keep, because it's good, it's positive. You might have a strong database, you might have strong webinar presentation skills, you might have a really great team, you might have a really great job with great career prospects. So just think about it. I'm not asking you to write anything down here. What are the things that you have and that you want? By the way, this is a really good process for starting your goal setting. We're not using it for that purpose here, but this is a really good goal setting process as well. What are the things that I want and have that I want to keep because I'm grateful for them? The next one, let's go down and we'll go around clockwise, is what are the things that you have that you don't want? So maybe you've got an old website. Maybe you've got a lease on a building that's expensive and you'd like to get out of it. Maybe you do have some staff members who are causing problems. Maybe you're stuck in a dead-end job but you need the money to pay the mortgage. So what are the things that you have that you don't want? Okay, the next one is what are the things, you've got to kind of wrap your head around this one. What are the things that you don't have that you don't want? So these are things that you're happy that you don't have them. So maybe you're happy that you don't have bad staff members. Maybe you're happy that you don't have a lease on a building. Maybe you're happy that you don't have, I don't know, what else, old software. Okay, and then the last one up here is what do you want but you don't have? So what do you want to get? So this is a pretty simple process, and when I do my goal setting, I look at each of these 4 areas every 90 days and certainly every year. Now, if I asked you which of these is the quadrant where you'll have most of your goals, I think the answer is pretty obvious. is this one up here. This is the goal setting quadrant. It's the stuff that you want that you don't have. It might also be down here, the remove quadrant, because there might be some things that you say, look, I've had them, and one of my goals is to get rid of that. So get myself to a position where I can remove that from my professional life. Okay, so that may be another option. Now if I ask you, which is the quadrant that is the quadrant of risk and innovation? So where would you want to make your biggest changes? So your opportunity for change, because if you don't change, there's a risk that somebody else will come along and change around you. It's interesting that when I ask people this, they give me different answers, but it's really this quadrant up here. It's the keep quadrant. It's the stuff that you want, that you have, that's going really well for your business, but that's possibly the biggest risk because it can make you complacent. So you've got a great database, which is great because that's one of the biggest things for a business, but it might mean that it'll prevent you from rebranding because suddenly there are a whole bunch of people who realize that, who discovered that, you're off brand. It might be that you've got a great team, but perhaps that's stopping you from moving to another country or another state because you're going to lose your team. It might be that you've got a great location in the CBD, and that's really great for you, and it adds to your positioning, but it might mean that it prevents you from being able to work from home and becoming lean and mean and doing outsourcing and delegation that you'd otherwise do. So the things that you want and have, which you think are really good things and are also possibly the things that could be the greatest risks to your business. And this is more true now than ever before. In the past, it wasn't. In the past, these were the things that you build on because they're your strengths, but now there could be possible weaknesses as well. I remember reading a book, and the title of the book was this: If It Ain't Broke, Break It. And this book I read in the early 1990s, and you may not be, you can probably read the little testimonial at the top, but if you can't, it says this is more than just entertaining reading. It's survival skills in these times of breakneck change. Times of breakneck change. And I was reading this in the early 90s when I was a project manager, software company, but that's more true than ever before. And even if you don't read the book, I hope you embrace the principle behind it, that if it ain't broke, break it in your business, because if you don't break it, somebody else will. Okay, so I've given you a little bit of time to think about this. I'm not asking you to make a commitment, I'm asking you to think of an idea of something in your business that you might consider breaking. I will keep this one anonymous. I won't say who said whatever you say, but please type in what you think you might break in your system. So for me, I'll start off. I reckon my website is one thing that I refresh it every couple of years, but it's about time I need to break it again and maybe start from scratch rather than trying to cobble on a new skin to the existing website. So that's something I could consider breaking. What else? I'm waiting to see what answers people provide. When I asked this question a couple of weeks ago for a group of financial planners, one of the things that I asked them to share some of their ideas. One of them said, working from an office, that was one thing they want to break, and that was working well for them, but they considered it was holding them back in some ways. Actually, somebody here says, broke my email system recently and changed to email. So sometimes a forced break is the best thing that can ever happen to you. Someone here says, so for example, when I was made redundant from my really good job as a project manager for a software company in the mid-90s, that's one of the best things that happened to me because it gave me freedom to look elsewhere and to start again from, if you like, from scratch. Okay, some great answers here. I won't say who they're from, but here's somebody: we're going to move away from a physical office and go home-based for all our teams in real estate, including admin. Yeah, great. A bio and introduction, new and updated. Yep. Somebody else says, broke the focus of my website and create a completely new website. Yeah, from an educational website to a profile website. Good. Website and better technology. My brand and brand positioning. Okay, brilliant. And I think we should be constantly asking ourselves this question, not just because we have this opportunity in this webinar, but ask ourselves, what have you got that you want? So what do you want and have, but you're willing to break, because if you don't break it, somebody else will. Okay, so let's look at the third area. The third area is setting aside the time for innovation, and this is time in a number of ways, and I just mean setting aside resources here. So it may not be time. Time is one of the resources, but in fact, I reckon there are three resources that are worth creating in your life, in your professional life, to allow you to innovate better. And I have this principle that habit trumps discipline. So three resources that I think that you need to create are time, money, and people. So not surprising that I've come up with those three, but let me tell you what I mean by this principle that habit trumps discipline. It's much harder to say, I need to find time to innovate than it is to have time set aside for innovating. It's much harder to say I can't afford, I don't have the money to do this innovative stuff than it is to have the money put aside. So that's what I mean. If you can make innovation a habit of time, money, and people, then it becomes much easier. So I'll tell you what I mean. So for me, for example, time, I have Fridays set aside generally as non-client work. So that means that I'm working on my business, not in my business. Now, sometimes client work needs to spill into a Friday, or sometimes I'm traveling because I'm speaking at a conference. That's unavoidable. But generally, the Friday time is non-client work. So that's set aside specifically for doing stuff like innovative stuff. And that's so client work becomes an exception rather than the rule. Money. So one of my clients told me that that he sets aside a technology fund. So every month he puts a certain amount of money aside in a separate bank account, which is to be spent on technology and gadgets. And he loves technology and gadgets. And because the money's been put aside, he has no guilt in then buying the latest gadget, even if he'll buy the latest iPhone, even though his current iPhone is fine, or he'll buy a new gadget knowing that he hasn't completely used up the other one, or he'll buy something not knowing what the use for it is, but the money's been put aside. So as a result of that, I've done the same thing. So I've got a technology fund. I've also got an education fund, so the money's put aside, and so I will pay to go to conferences, to do online training, to pay for stuff that I'm not sure that I'm going to get the return on investment in, but innovation's a little bit like that. You don't always know you're going to get the return on investment. And the last one is people, and that's all I'm saying there is have some regular habits where you hang out with people who can help you with innovation. So I've signed up with Thought Leaders Business School starting next year, which is going to be a really big business building strategy for me. But that's going to hang out with smart people who've got great ideas. Every month I run a personal, like a book club, a discussion group where we talk about different topics based around books generally. But that time set aside, we get 8 or 9 people together, and the whole purpose of that is not that we've got any actions out of it, but just to have interesting conversations. So what are you going to do to set aside time, set aside money, and collect people who can be innovative and who can create that environment for innovation? And as I said, if it becomes a habit, it's much easier than you having to find the time for it through discipline. Okay, so I'd like to, just as my last opportunity for you to ask questions, ask you, do you have any ways that you have set aside time, money, or people, like the examples I gave, or something completely different, where you're actually setting aside innovation is the goal, not necessarily something else? So it's not about getting it's not about increasing revenue, it's not about improving your business in any other way, except it's there open for innovation. So the sort of things that people have said to me in the past are things like a mastermind group, but the mastermind group, it doesn't have to be necessarily focused on something specific. It could be just general, just having interesting conversations. One of the people in my book club discussion group, he's a business owner as well, and he says he gets together with 3 of his mates every week, every Friday afternoon, and they have conversations about their business. And the idea is that they're action-oriented, but they also can be open-ended and without specific answers. Yeah, so Philippe says, I have a fund for training. Yeah, it can be any kind, out of curiosity, exactly. So what I do, so my fund is I invest 10% of my take-home salary that I pay myself. 10% of my salary every month when I pay myself, 10% goes into my education fund, and a slightly lower percent goes into the technology fund. It ends up being about 3%. Here, Paul says Thought Leaders Business School, a mastermind group, and a book club. Great, great. Okay, and the point I really want to make here is the idea of making it a habit, because otherwise it's so easy for you to go at the end of this webinar, go, great, I want to do all this stuff, and then life gets in the way. So please make sure that you actually make time for it, set aside money for it, and have the right people around for it. Okay, let me continue. Just to finish off, so just a summary of what we talked about. So we talked about creating the space in terms of permission, deciding what to focus on for your innovation, and then setting aside, I've called this time, but it's really resources for innovation. So thank you for coming along, and thank you for participating. Remember, when you complete the exit survey, I'll send you this special report that I wrote. I have got a webinar coming up, which is a little bit different from the webinars in this series. It's called Build a Mobile App in an Hour, so it's slightly different from the innovation topic, but I'm just announcing it here in case you want to register for it. So it is a paid webinar. It's coming up in exactly from now, 3 weeks' time. Does that sound right? 27th of October. Yeah, that's right. 3 weeks from now. And it is now possible to build a smartphone app in an hour. It used to be quite difficult and quite expensive, but the software's got a lot better. Smartphone technology's got a lot better. And I have spent the last few weeks figuring out a new software platform that lets you build mobile apps. There's a few of them around, but and I've experimented with a few. And this one's pretty good. It takes a little while to wrap your head around it, but that's the reason why I'm running this webinar. So the webinar runs for an hour and a half, but I'll spend an hour of that actually building an app, and I'll show you how to build it. It literally is possible to build your mobile app in an hour. I mean, some of the content you may have to have ready to preload and some of the graphics, but to actually have the app ready, and then you press a button and it gets sent to the iTunes Store and the Google Play Store. You do have to sign up for those, but that doesn't take much. It's just filling in a form and paying them a little bit of money. So that webinar is coming up on the 27th of October. If you're an eGurus member, then you don't have to pay for it. You can go to the website and read about it, but go into the eGurus site and you can go straight to the registration page, because that's one of the benefits that you get as part of your membership. If you're not an eGurus member, then yes, please go and pay for that webinar or join up eGurus membership as well. So as I said, thanks very much for coming along. If you're interested in finding out more about my speaking services, then go to gihanspeaks.com. And apart from that, thanks so much for coming along. I really appreciate you coming along and participating. It's always nice when I do these webinars to have people who participate, who share their experiences. It's not just for me, but it's useful for other people, especially when we're talking about a topic like innovation. So thanks everyone. We will have more webinars coming up. I've got another one coming up later this month, next month, and you'll get the email reminders about that anyway. If you're not already registered for this webinar series, then please go to gihanpereira.com and register. So if you're watching this live, you don't need to because you're already registered, but if you're not registered, then go to gihanpereira.com. And if you want to sign up for that Build a Mobile App in 1 hour, register for that separately. It's not part of this series. Thanks everyone, and bye for now.